Homage to the root teacher, Buddha Shakyamuni. Homage to the wisdom warrior, Manjushri. Homage to all the benevolent lineage masters. The supreme Dharma, infinitely profound and subtle, is rarely encountered, even in millions of kalpas. Now we are able to hear, study, and follow it. May we fully realize the Tathagata's true meaning. In order to liberate all sentient beings from samsara, please generate the supreme bodhicitta. Let's continue with our study of the words of my perfect teacher. We have now come to the way of listening to the Dharma. Among the 6 stains in listening to the Dharma, the one we're discussing now is the 5th, inward tension. When we listen to a teaching, if we fixate onto just a few isolated words or points, we become like a brown bear digging out marmots, catching one while the last one slips away. That way, we can never take in the teaching as a whole. We touched on this in the previous lesson. When we practice and when we listen to the Dharma, we must never let the mind scatter outward. Once it wanders off to external things, there's no way the meaning of the teaching can sink in. As we discussed before, the 5 sense consciousnesses, together with the mental consciousness, each reach out to their own external objects. So while we're listening, we can't let ourselves be attached to those external phenomena and get carried away. This is extremely important. For ordinary people like us, when we sit down to practice, the moment the slightest thing happens around us, our attention scatters. But we've studied the Mahayana, and we understand how listening is meant to be done. So it's crucial that we hold the mind with mindfulness and clear awareness while we listen and practice. That said, there's a flip side. In our practice, we also shouldn't turn too far inward. Regarding inner withdrawal, people are wired differently, and some feel they have to be intensely focused, intensely concentrated, but that focus can be overdone. They might grasp onto or scrutinize over a single point or a single meaning and keep straining to decipher the meaning or pour all their effort into one practice. Some people practice the channels, energies, and essences. For instance, they let the mind fixate and grip tighter and tighter. In the end, the body grows uncomfortable, and sometimes the mind does too. It can even bring on all kinds of obstacles. This really does happen. That's why, throughout our practice, keeping the mind in healthy balance matters so much. And so the text tells us this: when we listen to the Dharma, we shouldn't clamp down too hard, fixating with extreme intensity on one word or one thing. If we do, we may walk away only remembering a single point while the rest of the teaching never registers clearly. This is exactly why how we listen is so important. If you catch only one thing and ignore everything else, your understanding stays lopsided. There's a well-known analogy for this: a brown bear digging out marmots. In Tibet, this story gets told a lot. For one thing, the bear likes to dig burrows and sleep in them. For another, when something it dislikes comes along, it fights with it and kills it. In the process, it also digs out marmots. During the 3 months in winter, these marmots generally stay underground to hibernate and don't come out at all. It's a natural, instinctive sort of meditation. That's why the marmot is often used as an image for practitioners who try to empty the mind of everything. While the marmot is down in its burrow, the bear digs it out. And because there are so many of them, a whole family hibernating together, fast asleep, the bear grabs one and gives it a hard smack with its paw. Then it tucks the marmot under its rump and goes back to digging. But as it digs, the marmot it just smacked comes to, and the moment it wakes up, it runs off. So the bear digs again, catches another, and repeats the very same process. It spends the whole day this way, digging up one marmot after another, and in the end it's left with just the one in its paw. Apart from that single one, it has nothing. There's a similar saying in Chinese folk culture, the black bear picking corn. The idea is very much the same. The bear snaps off one ear of corn and tucks it under its arm, then snaps off another, losing the first. In the end, it comes away with nothing but the one in its hand. So this too is a foolish way to go about things. Some of us practice in just this way. We can hold on to only one concept, and we give no thought to anything else, so that one point is all we're left with. The same can happen while you're listening to a teaching. Say you concentrate very hard, but not on the whole, only on one particular part. While I'm teaching and I tell a certain story, you tuck that story away with full attention, but you've already forgotten the one before it. And if it keeps going like that, by the time I recite the final verse, you may hold on to that, but by the end of class, everything taught earlier is gone. So this analogy works just like the one before it. This is why, in our daily practice, how we steady the mind really does matter. At first, you won't even take in the basic principles of the Dharma, and for a good while you'll need to learn how listening itself is done, how to hold on to what I say, and how to work with the text. Once you've read the text, 3 things need to come together, and bringing them together is important. Your own understanding, the meaning on the page, and what the teacher explains. Otherwise, problems creep in. Some people never open the book while the teacher is speaking. They just listen, with no idea which passage the teaching is following. That's one type. Others listen with full attention the whole time, but never go back to the book afterward. And then, of course, there are still others who pay no attention to the book or to what the teacher is saying, and simply sit there, heads down, lost in themselves. A few may even meditate during the lesson, right in front of the teacher, settling into the 7-point posture of Vairocana, and then start meditating or practicing Tammo. Among people who didn't understand how listening works, this used to be very common. And it's quite strange, because what you should be doing in class is reading along and connecting the text with your own understanding. There was a Khenpo named Jin Wang, whom I once heard that when he first began teaching us, he said as much. For a while, you really need to train at this, or you simply won't know how to listen to Dharma properly. And that's quite true. Some newly ordained monks and new lay practitioners need time to adjust, because the way we teach the Dharma isn't entirely the same in style or in method as the way teachers out in the world do it. So it takes some time to grow used to the proper etiquette, and that's our hope for everyone. Among the many monks and among the lay practitioners in the big cities, the spirit of study is already quite good, but how one listens to the Dharma matters just as much. Each of us should look back at what we've laid out so far and ask, how do we clear away the 3 faults? And how do we counter the 6 stains? If we work through every one of these points well, then the Dharma the teacher gives can truly settle into your heart. As I said a moment ago, when we take in a teaching, focusing too intently inward brings its own difficulty. You grasp one thing only to drop the next, and it's impossible for you to grasp the whole picture. So the first thing we have to do is examine our own mind. The text also points out that turning too far inward brings on a heavy, sleepy dullness, along with other such faults. The letter to a friend says the same thing. Dullness and the other 5 obstacles are like thieves that rob us of the wealth of virtue. So in our practice, scattering too far outward and drawing too far inward are both, without question, serious obstacles to practice. Some of the great masters and accomplished ones of the past spent years at their studies, and through that they came to know exactly which conditions hold practice back and which work against it. So when they practiced, they could clear those away completely. This is why we have to keep the balance just right, neither too tight nor too loose. Some Dharma friends throw themselves into their studies and become extremely diligent, At first they may go without sleep and without meals, forgetting to eat or rest, practicing hard day and night. Then, after a while, they swing the other way and grow far too slack. During that first burst of intense effort, in a single day they might sleep only 3 or 4 hours. They're so driven that when the people around them say, "Don't push so hard, it's bad for your health," they still won't listen. Then, before long, they go too loose, far too slack, and now they sleep the whole day away except for those same 3 or 4 hours. So they fall into both extremes, one after the other, and that simply doesn't work. I made this very point a couple of days ago when I was teaching the practice of the preliminary. Practice is the work of a whole lifetime. It isn't a matter of a day or two, or a month or two. Yet some practitioners seem to be in a great hurry. After going so long without ever meeting the Dharma, now they want to be enlightened at once, to get some sign of progress right away. But that doesn't necessarily come, because practice is, after all, a long road. It's like going to university. You can't expect results in 2 or 3 days. So this is something everyone needs to understand. Being too relaxed is just as unreasonable. So you have to hold yourself to it and not slide into laziness. Each day, put the time that's meant for practice into practice, but don't wear yourself out. If you're too driven, you fall into the inward withdrawal the text describes. Whether you're hearing a teaching from the master or studying the scriptures, you need to relax. Don't be anxious, and don't push too hard, because that, too, can sometimes land a practitioner in trouble. So in many of the Buddha's own stories, this lesson, not too tight and not too loose, comes up again and again. The Words of My Perfect Teacher has the story of Srona. Actually, the scriptures hold many similar stories like it. For instance, in the Samyukta Agama and in the great treatise on the perfection of wisdom. In the great treatise, there's the story of the one called Srona. And in fact, the one told in the Words of My Perfect Teacher is quite similar to the one in Vinaya Sutra. He's also known as Srona. He took ordination under the Venerable Katyayana. And after about a year, Venerable Katyayana gave him full ordination as a bhikshu. Because 10 monks were needed to bear witness, they sent word to ask the Buddha for permission to confer full ordination with just 5 monks. In the course of all this, he had the chance to meet the Buddha. At the time, Srona was practicing walking meditation at the Buddha's side and circumambulating the stupa. Now, in a past life, Srona had given others offerings such as sheepskins, and because of that good deed, for 91 kalpas, he was reborn as someone with great wealth. He even had hair growing on the soles of his feet, and the skin there was very tender. So later, as he did his circumambulations, his feet would often bleed. The Buddha granted him a special exception and said, "You're a rather special monk. You see, in India, the monks originally went barefoot as part of their ascetic discipline. But in your case, I'll allow an exception. You may wear shoes with a single layer sole." The Buddha gave his permission, yet Srona refused. He was also rather proud, and even though the Buddha had granted the exception, he said before him, "I've already given up 80 cartloads of gold, along with 7 elephants and their attendants, and a great deal of other wealth." And it was true. When he was born, his family had an enormous amount of gold, and later his father, overjoyed, offered him a great deal more. But he wanted none of it and left to become a monk. He said, "I gave up all that gold and kept not a bit of it. I'm not about to get attached to a pair of shoes now. I won't give up my practice for the sake of a shoe sole. I don't need them." He was extremely diligent, and for the time being, the Buddha said nothing more. And he did practice there for quite a while. But he pushed so hard, and some of our own Dharma friends may be the same. When they first arrive, They're so intense that they won't even eat and leave themselves no time at all, which gets a bit extreme. In the end, when no spiritual experiences came and he saw no sign of progress in his practice, he began to think, I come from a wealthy family. Maybe I should just give back my vows, go home, and enjoy a comfortable life. As a lay practitioner, I could still support the Sangha. Perhaps practicing that way would be better. He was leaning toward carrying on his practice in a far more relaxed way. At that point, the Buddha, knowing his mind through clairvoyance, sent a monk to summon him and then spoke to him directly. Here is what the Buddha asked him. He asked, when you were a layman, were you good at playing a stringed instrument? Srona said yes. Then the Buddha asked, did the music sound best when the strings were loose or when they were tight? Srona answered, neither. It sounds best when they're tuned just right. He understood at once. Practice should work the same way. Through this, neither too loose nor too tight, he later attained the fruit of an arhat. This is basically the same as the story in The Words of My Perfect Teacher. The same kind of story appears in the Agama Sutra and in the great treatise. The names and a few details may differ a little here, but the story is basically the same. The text goes on, long ago, when the Venerable Ananda was teaching Srona how to practice, Srona was sometimes strung far too tight, and at other times unusually slack. In the end, he couldn't give rise to any meditative experience at all, because he kept swinging between too tight and too loose until he was on the verge of giving up completely. Practitioners today really do have this same fault, and we have to watch for it. So he went to the Buddha to ask for help. The world-honored one asked him, when you were at home, were you good at playing the veena? The veena being a stringed instrument, much like a lute. Srona answered, I was extremely good at it. The world-honored one went on, did the lovely sound of your playing come when the strings were stretched very tight, or when they were very loose? Now Srona knew this from experience, because when the strings are pulled too tight, the sound comes out sharp and screechy, and you simply can't draw a proper note from them that way. I'm not much of a musician myself, but plenty of our Dharma friends here can play. We could even ask them one by one about their days at home. Some, though, will say, no, I can't play. The one thing I'm good at is eating spare ribs, pig's trotters, this and that. I'm kidding. Anyway, Srona said, it's neither one. Only when the strings are tuned just right, neither too tight nor too loose, do they give a beautiful, pleasing sound. The world-honored one said, training the mind is just the same. You can't be too loose, and you can't be too tight. This really is a crucial point, and every one of us has this very flaw. We all start off too uptight and too loose later on. So it's something to watch for. When you first take up Buddhism, when you're first ordained, for those first 2 or 3 days, you are intensely diligent. It was the same for us. Those of us who'd first started studying Buddhism at a young age didn't have many opinions. But once we were newly ordained, our prejudices were especially strong. Whenever we saw some older Lama whose discipline or conduct seemed a little off, we'd think, how can they be called a monk? Now that I've been ordained, I'm going to do everything strictly by the Dharma. These senior monks have been ordained all these years. How are they still behaving and speaking this way? What are they even doing? We judge them by their behavior and their words. All sorts of wrong views came pouring out, and I felt quite arrogant too, fixated on outward appearances and form. And we see some lay practitioners doing exactly the same today. In their first 2 or 3 days of practice, they're already handing out advice to this person and that one, even lecturing and correcting the teacher. You ought to do it like this. In Buddhism, we do such and such. They have a great deal to say, but here is the thing. Some practitioners grow more diligent the longer they go, while the very ones who were so intense and earnest at the start gradually slip downhill. In the end, they go a long time without so much as opening the text, and their conduct stops aligning with the Dharma altogether. This does happen sometimes. So, in our daily practice, everyone has to stay cautious. As the text says, because Srona followed the world-honored one's instructions and practiced faithfully, exactly as he was told, neither too tight nor too loose, in a steady, measured way, over the long haul, year in and year out. Many practitioners are just like this. The ones who reach the highest levels of realization are the same every single day. They were like this 10 years ago and 20 years ago. Long, sustained effort like that brings unmistakable results. It isn't something you throw together in a day or two. It just isn't. So sustained diligence and steady listening to the Dharma truly do matter. And in the end, he attained the fruit of realization. This same story, by the way, appears in the Sutra of 42 chapters, and the earlier part of it goes the same way as it does here. There, too, the Buddha said, Shramana, one who learns the path. It is the same for you. If the mind is well tuned, the path is gained. If the mind is well tuned, the path can be reached. But if the mind is out of tune, too agitated, the body grows weary. Once the body is weary, the mind turns irritable. And once the mind is irritable, your resolve for the path slowly slips away, until in the end, all kinds of harmful deeds follow. The Sutra of 42 chapters lays this point out very clearly. The mind has to be kept in the right balance, neither too tight nor too loose. When you have time, read through the Agama Sutras and the great treatise I mentioned earlier. If you go through them again and again, you'll find a wealth of detailed pith instructions there, many different ways to tune the mind, and the world outside speaks the same way. The old Chinese classic, the Book of Rites, says, knowing the time to draw tight and the time to let loose. That was the way of King Wen and King Wu. Worldly people put it like that as well. Take shooting arrows, for instance. The string can't be drawn too tight, and it can't be too slack. Getting that tension just right was exactly how King Wen and King Wu governed their realm. The point is made very plainly. So in our everyday practice, we need this same kind of know-how. Without it, just look at anything in the world and you'll find it works the same way. Take running a company or running a monastery. If the person in charge is too strict, handling everything strictly by the book, by the regulations, with every last rule spelled out, then they may be holding the reins too tight, and the people under them can't bear it. They won't last. They'll all leave. But if you're too loose, the whole organization comes apart at the seams. No one wants to stay where there are no real rules, so being too loose doesn't work either. This is why I so deeply admire Phuntsok Rinpoche, and I don't even mean the balance he kept in his own practice, but the way he ran the monastery. He found an approach that suited the minds of modern people, one that actually worked in practice. This is something we should all keep in mind going forward. Whether in a Dharma center or in a corporate workplace, it matters to carry yourself with measure and to know where the line is. If you're too harsh, people in this world will treat you like some demon king, and that won't do. If you're too soft, they'll look down on you like a lump of dung and not regard you as a person at all, which won't do either. So, as the jewel garland of Royal Council puts it, anyone who has to lead needs both a wrathful side and a peaceful one. Whatever level you've reached inwardly, if your outward conduct keeps this kind of balance, then handling any matter becomes easy. And the same holds for your own practice. You can't be too loose, because if you are, you stay distracted forever, and that won't do. There are people in the world today who spend all day eating, drinking, and chasing amusement, drifting through life in a fog, hardly living like a person at all. It's truly sad to see. Others go the opposite way and are far too tight. We do admire that kind of diligence, of course, but such intensity can't be kept up for long. Here at Larongar, there was a man who came with great devotion. When he first arrived, he began doing full-length prostrations from about 50 meters outside my courtyard and kept coming that way. I urged him again and again to stop, but he prostrated the whole distance until his forehead was streaming with blood. He said, "From this day on, I take refuge in you as my teacher. I'll carry on all your work of spreading the Dharma and helping beings, every bit of it, by myself. I'm going to become a truly excellent disciple." At the time, I could see he was a little too eager, and that worried me. Later on, though, he turned out to be rather skilled, and I handed many tasks over to him. But then, whether from exhaustion or for some other reason, he swung the other way and grew far too slack. What he did after that, I'd rather not describe. It was the complete reverse of before. So with people, it is true. When someone starts out all tears and drama and makes a massive effort, you can't necessarily count on it. Whether that kind of effort can hold up over the long term, each of us has to observe in ourselves and see how we're doing. People are generally like this, and it isn't only true of Buddhist practice. It's the same in worldly work and in daily life. Even in ordinary relationships, things are wonderful at the start. Not long ago, in our home region, people were talking about two families who had just become in-laws last year and got along beautifully at first. In our part of Tibet, we don't live the way people do in the Han areas. We live in tents. Normally, each family keeps to its own tent. But over the new year, because these two families were so warm with each other, they pitched their two tents together, something you'd hardly ever see. Everyone shared food straight from one another's bowls, and they couldn't have been closer. Yet only a few months later, all sorts of conflicts started to break out. In the end, things went very badly. Many of the elders could see it coming and would say, "Those two families are far too close this year. Something unlucky may well happen next year." It's the same in practice. An experienced practitioner can tell at a glance, this one has swung too far one way, that one too far the other. Neither extreme works. The right kind of person keeps a steady pace, day after day, all year round. The same when listening to teachings as in daily practice, never swinging to extremes. So this does matter, that practice be carried on over the long term. As that story just showed, practice has to be orderly, done step by step, never rushed or forced. Otherwise, it may well not succeed, and that's something to watch for. On this same point, the Dakini Machik Labdron also said, "Neither tight nor loose. This is the heart of right view." I've spoken of Machik Labdron before. In Tibet, she was a famous Dakini of the Chod lineage. Having relied on Padampa Sangye as her teacher, she came to fully realize the emptiness taught in the Prajna Paramita. And to this day, the Dharma lineage she passed down is practiced in every tradition in Tibet. Many of her treasure teachings, too, lie hidden in sacred mountains, and great masters have revealed quite a few of them since. The accounts of her dates don't all agree, however. Some records, for instance, say she was born in 1103 AD and passed away in 1204 AD. Others say she was born in 1031 AD. So the accounts vary a little. But whatever the dates, she is truly remembered in Tibet for her compassion. Resting entirely in compassion and in the realization of emptiness, she took in countless beings as students, and even some of the 8 classes of gods and nagas. To all of them she offered her form, uniting emptiness with compassion to win them over and tame them. She was a great, accomplished master. Now, in the teachings she left for those who came after her, she said, whether we're listening to a teaching or practicing, we mustn't be too tight, because if we are, the very problems we just described will follow. Think about why these days some people who go into retreat end up fixating their mind on one thing the whole time, end up a little unwell in body and mind. When they come out, their eyes are bloodshot and their hair has grown long. to the extent that no one dares go near them. That's what being too tense looks like. Others go too loose. They stop doing retreat at all. They leave. And once they're out and back in the city, the Dharma, cause and effect, all of it ends up meaning nothing to them, as empty to their eyes as open space. People like that are too slack, and there are a great many like them these days. So being too tight won't do, and being too loose won't do. What works is the middle, steady and earnest, neither tight nor loose. For such a practitioner, this view holds a deep secret approach, and the secret is just this: neither tight nor loose. Sarahapa said it long ago in a verse. If the mind is bound up tight, loosen it, and it is freed. In other words, once the knots within the mind are untied, once you let it relax, liberation can come. What does that mean in practice? Some people fix on one thing and get terribly anxious. I still can't get my practice to work. It's driving me to despair. Lamala, would you please give me a whack with your stick? Right now, I so badly want to wake up. You see, for over 20 years I missed out on encountering the Dharma, and I've only just begun. I've fallen so far behind, missed so many teachings, and none of these states of realizations has shown up for me yet. I have to open the divine eye this instant. They get so frantic that some even knock their heads against the wall, trying to force it open. But that isn't necessarily realistic. For some of us, real practice simply takes time. I hope those just starting out won't be in such a hurry. Regardless, the fact that you've now met the Dharma is a wonderful thing. But trying to swallow a whole pot of food in one mouthful is bound to be hard. Take it one step at a time, and that way these states can actually arise in you and stay. So all through our study, we should do as Machik Labdron said, and keep practicing steadily over the long term. I've seen many great masters, in Tibet and in the Han regions alike, who put in the same effort day after day for 10 or 20 years. Only that kind of effort yields results. It isn't a matter of being intensely diligent for a single day, fired up while you're receiving an empowerment from the guru, or pouring yourself into a class or two, a book or two. That counts for little, and it won't necessarily bring liberation overnight. On this point, I hope everyone will hold a long-term view in mind, because only then can practice succeed. So the mind must not be drawn too tight and focus intently inward, nor let go too loose and scattered outward. Keep it balanced, neither tight nor loose. Exactly right, so that all the senses rest at ease. Day to day, you can't be too tight or too loose. Hour by hour, day by day, do all your practice faithfully and just as it should be done. But every so often you do need to ease off a little, not let the mind stay so wound up. Now, some of us are very good at relaxing. They need no encouragement on that front. Just as Mifam Rinpoche had said in The Beacon of Certainty, I once said to some Dharma friends, look after your health, don't drive yourself so hard. And they answered, Lama La, you needn't tell me that. Relaxing is no problem for me. I have just two talents. One is sleeping, the other is eating. And for those two, I don't need any teacher to guide me. So the ones who do need to learn to relax are those in retreat and those just beginning to practice. At times like that, people get anxious. They want results, and they want them right away. But that is exactly when you should let the mind slowly relax. So there's a sense of joy, of ease, calm, and contentment in your heart. In that state, practice will succeed. Otherwise, if you keep thinking, I have to learn this, I have to learn that, and there's no skipping any of it, you'll wear your body down in the end and grow only more anxious. And the more anxious you get, the less you can actually accomplish. It's like people rushing to get something done. When their minds are frantic, I've watched them just dash back and forth and never manage the task. Our minds work in exactly the same way. So we do need this instruction. That brings the fifth stain to a close. Next comes the sixth, weariness. While we're receiving the Dharma, we mustn't let ourselves grow tired of it or fed up with it. For example, when a teaching runs so long that your hunger becomes difficult to endure, or when you're caught in wind and rain or under a blazing sun, you must never let irritation set in, lose your willingness to go on listening, and simply walk away. Yet some people in the world today react exactly like that. Because when you're listening to a teaching, the session sometimes runs very long. By then you haven't eaten and you're hungry, or you've had nothing to drink and your mouth is dry, or there's a strong storm, or the sun beats down. In Tibet, situations like that were extremely common in the past. When we first came to study at the academy, for instance, the hall where the master taught each day was fairly run down, but at least it kept off the rain and gave us some shelter. When we ourselves were teaching and when we were receiving transmissions, for something like 10 years, we were basically out in the open, under the blazing sun and in the storms. I often think back to my days leading the study sessions. I probably had 70 or 80 people in front of me. Once, in winter, when His Holiness was teaching the commentary on valid cognition, we were in a courtyard with snow coming down from above and nothing but bare ground below. It was bitterly cold, but none of that was much of a problem, because for the sake of the Dharma, everyone could bear it. We weren't like people today, who want a cushion even in a fine teaching hall. We needed nothing of the sort. We had no cushions at all, just the ground, and nothing overhead while the heavy snow kept falling. Then the wind would suddenly gust up and blow every book out of our book holders, and we'd be off chasing them everywhere. Truly, this happened all the time. Yet back then, our resolve only seemed to grow stronger and stronger. When we thought of the hardships the great masters of old had endured, when we recalled the stories of how they gave up everything in their search for the Dharma, those memories made it all feel like something glorious and joyful. We weren't like people today who complain, "I can hardly walk, I can't sit on a concrete floor even for a moment," and so on. People in the big cities have all sorts of such particular demands. It wasn't like that for us. But the point here is this: when a teaching runs long, you must never let irritation rise, thinking, "What is this teacher rambling on about? I wish he'd just let us out early." Some people, perhaps short on merit from past lives, fail to see that the longer the teaching, the better it is for them. To the listener, though, it may not feel that way at all. Of course, with some teachers who speak brilliantly, the time flies by, while with others who come across as long-winded, it can feel different to the listener. That does happen. But either way, everything they teach is the Buddha's Dharma, and this Dharma is rare and precious. So however long a teaching lasts, we shouldn't let ourselves grow tired of it. These days there isn't all that much teaching going on, and chances to listen are few and far between. I think I've mentioned this before. Master Chengguan, in his day, gave 50 full series of teachings on the Avatamsaka Sutra. The Avatamsaka Sutra has 80 volumes, and he taught 8 hours a day. Here, a few of our own Dharma friends feel a little worn out after listening for just an hour or two, which shows how greatly the strength of people's minds can differ. In the past, Master Daoxuan, whether teaching or listening, taught the 4-part Vinaya more than 20 times, so the accounts say. And then there's Jetsongkhapa, who may well have been the most formidable teacher of the scriptures in all of Tibetan history. Once, a number of great masters and geshes gathered to look into a question together: which of the great masters of Tibet had taught the most? In the end, they decided it was Sherab Sengye, who would give 11 classes in a single day. He was the most remarkable of all. Hearing this, many disciples asked Jetsongkhapa, "Could you teach us as much as he does?" He said, "Let me go into retreat first, and then we'll see." He stayed in retreat, it seems, for 20 days. And when the 20 days were up, he agreed. Then, in a single day, he taught them 15 great treatises. The listeners had come from all over, and when they heard that 15 treatises would be taught at once, they were overjoyed and gathered round. I think the disciples of that time were quite extraordinary. Just imagine it. 15 treatises, and I've looked at which 15 they were. The 5 treatises of Maitreya, the 5 treatises of Madhyamaka, the way of the Bodhisattva, the introduction to the middle way, and so on. These great treatises, all 15 were taught in a single day. How would we feel having to sit through that, teaching the ornament of clear realization, then the 400 stanzas, then the 60 verses on reasoning, 15 treatises all being taught at once. And whenever the shorter treatises were finished, he would simply keep going, until at last they were all complete. His biography even mentions when he had taught 21 treatises in a single day. The standard 15 he taught in full over the course of the Dharma gathering. So among the great masters of Tibetan Buddhism, there were many who taught a great number of treatises, and their disciples weren't like us, good for only an hour or so of listening. Some lay practitioners in the Han regions, after 3 hours on a Sunday afternoon, will complain, "My backside aches, my legs have gone limp, my feet have gone stiff." Well, a foot is soft flesh on the outside and hard bone within, so I'm not sure how they decide which it is, limp or stiff, but you never hear of anyone's feet going stiff or limp from watching a show. It all comes down to having no faith in practicing the Dharma. Sit those same people in front of a 3-hour movie and they won't feel the least bit tired. They'll stay glued to it, riveted, watching with such an intent focus. You're lucky if their eyeballs don't drop right out of their heads. All that while, no need to eat, no need to drink, no need to use the bathroom. The focus is extraordinary. That's just how worldly people are when it comes to worldly business or some pointless distraction. They'll pour in any amount of time without minding at all. It's like a child. Let him run wild outside, bouncing and leaping around for hours, and they would not complain. But ask them to sit for 1 hour of homework or reading, and at once they start asking, "This won't do. Can I step out for a minute? Can I do something else instead?" So everyone is like this, ordinary people most of all. The moment they have to do something meaningful, like just listening to a little teaching or doing a little practice, all sorts of complaints and issues start cropping up. So I think we have to be patient with the Dharma, and we have to have sincere faith. Don't tell yourself, "I listened to a bit of Dharma today, and now I'm a little tired." You mustn't think that way. Look at it like this. In a 24-hour day, if you give 1 hour to listening to the Dharma, the other 23 are still yours for everything else. Many people in the city use, say, 1 afternoon a week, 3 hours of teaching. Out of all the hours in your week, 3 hours are spent on the Dharma. I don't think that's too much to ask. And you shouldn't tell yourself, "I've spent far too long on the Dharma. I can't even straighten my back. Could all this listening have given me some spinal condition?" Rather than reaching for excuses, we have to build up the resilience of the mind. And even if you can't bear to go on, you still can't just sit there being disrespectful, withdrawn, foggy, and dozing off. That won't do. Khenpo Ngakchung's instructions say that if you genuinely don't want to listen, you may quietly get up, make 2 resolves, never to part from the Dharma and never to part from the teacher, and simply step out. That is allowed. The alternative, letting wrong views about the teacher and the Dharma take root, is far more serious. So the teachings say, and this is a key point, we don't listen because we're forced to. We listen because we want liberation. And once you have listened, the benefit is enormous. It's understandable that ordinary people don't grasp this. But for us as monastics, the case is different because you've already chosen this road. You've given up your worldly family and everything else, so you ought to have the right mentality for receiving teachings. And these days, when lay practitioners in the big cities gather on their own to study, I find that very endearing, like children with no parents getting themselves together and saying, let's study hard, let's do our homework. Children who talk like that are especially endearing. When you have parents, they keep an eye on you the whole time. But with no parents, for children to be that self-disciplined is genuinely touching. And the fact is, we ordinary beings are just like children. Without a teacher to guide us, we won't do good on our own. That much is certain. Still, I feel that some people are doing rather well now, and you have to keep it up. You can't sit through a class or two and then think, that's enough now. Don't be satisfied so easily. In worldly life, once you've finished a task or two, do you stop there? Not at all. You keep at it and keep building on it. In the same way, we have to keep putting in effort with the Dharma and hold this in mind. If any weariness comes over you, don't give up. Instead, think like this. Right now, I've gained this precious human life. I've had the good fortune to meet a qualified teacher, and I have this rare chance to hear profound teachings. It is more than I could have hoped for, the fruit of merit gathered over countless kalpas. Tell yourself, I have gained this precious human life, and without it, no practice of any kind could ever be conducted. Look at all the beings around us, animals, hungry ghosts, hell beings. Not one of them has any chance to practice the Dharma, and even a human body by itself isn't enough. Without meeting a teacher, the opportunity still won't come. But we have already met a fully qualified teacher. I've spoken before about these qualities. Generally, a teacher's qualities are many, but the Gelug teachings say a key one is having renounced this life, and that matters a great deal, turning away from this life. Some Kadampa teachings say the key quality is keeping the vows purely. Whether in the Sutra tradition or the Vajrayana, they should have pure vows. And in the Nyingma tradition, in the teachings of masters led by Patrul Rinpoche, it is said that the chief quality of a teacher is whether he possesses bodhicitta. Longchenpa, too, lays out the qualities of a Vajrayana teacher. In his text, The Great Chariot, the commentary on finding rest in the nature of mind, he names 8 in all: mastery of the Vajrayana, perfection in the mantras, attainment of the sign of warmth, and so on. And in the end, following his own teacher, Rigdzin Kumaradza, he held that a pure lineage is one of the most essential qualities of all. So the sayings go, but whatever the case, as long as a teacher knows the Dharma and genuinely wishes to benefit others, then to have such a teacher is a great good fortune for anyone. I often think how, in this short human life, meeting His Holiness was a vast blessing built up over millions of kalpas. Otherwise, plenty of the beings around us run into people with wrong, misguided views, and that happens all too often. And because people lack clear judgment and wisdom, when they fall in with a false teacher, they actually feel proud of it and boast about who their teacher is, when in fact some of those teachers follow non-Buddhist paths. In this degenerate age, anything can happen. Yet even now, to have teachers like ours, accomplished masters who are like living Buddhas, with a lineage beyond all doubt, is something most of us recognize and accept. So it should fill us with joy. And we also hold profound teachings in which the Sutrayana and Vajrayana traditions are fully joined together, perfectly harmonized, with no contradiction between them. In a degenerate age like ours, especially now, when people's bodies and minds are in such turmoil, this is profoundly rare. Some lay practitioners do understand it, that we now have the chance both to listen and to practice, with every condition exceptionally favorable. Such an opportunity is hard to come by. Yesterday, I met a Dharma friend who had spent time in monasteries devoted to ascetic practice, and in others that stress a single, focused practice. Later, through various circumstances, he came here, and he found that without study and reflection, practice alone, isn't enough. Take pure asceticism, for instance. His conduct was excellent, eating just one meal a day and keeping his vows spotless, which is the root of all good qualities. His behavior matched the Dharma every single day, and yet, inwardly, his afflictions didn't seem to be getting any treatment. There were gaps in many areas, so in the end he didn't stay. He went next to monasteries built around one specialized practice. But there, too, the basics of the Dharma weren't prioritized. There was no real study or reflection, no learning. So that much remained beyond him. While he sat reciting a mantra day after day, certain afflictions simply couldn't be resolved through this approach. Later he came here, where on one hand he gained some understanding of the truths of the Dharma, and on the other he had the chance to actually meditate. So, and I don't say this to praise ourselves and run others down, this is how I see it. Perhaps it has to do with the tradition of study His Holiness built up over so many years. Whatever the case, I think you first have to meet a good teacher. His teachings then need to be complete, covering all the Buddha's Dharma, both Sutrayana and Vajrayana, and you have to grasp the proper order. First study and reflect, and only then practice. As for conduct, the vows serve as the true foundation beneath it all. Practice the Dharma this way in this life, and it will be wonderfully complete. So we should be glad to be alive now. As the condensed verses of Prajnaparamita and many other Mahayana scriptures say, meeting these supreme teachings in this life is no accident. We didn't end up here for no reason. Now, some ordained people may think, I became a monk by sheer chance because I had a falling out with my family. So that quarrel was what brought me here. Or, my whole turn to the Dharma was the doing of my partner or my friends. So they imagine they arrived here with no real cause or condition behind it, but it isn't causeless at all. The quarrel was only a passing secondary condition. Your true, immediate cause is that in past lives we formed a bond with the Mahayana and practiced virtue before countless teachers and Buddhas. That is why, in this life, we get to receive Dharma at all. When the time is right, I can teach you the condensed verses of Prajnaparamita, but merely having the sound reach your ears, or this book come into your hands, without the karmic conditions from past lives, a person could never see it, never hold it, never hear it. So this is the Buddhist principle of cause and effect. The Buddha taught it. It is not something invented by ordinary people who lack wisdom. So we should think of it this way. It is a blessing from many lifetimes and countless kalpas that we meet such fine Dharma in this very life. That is how to look at it. Because this Dharma is hard to encounter. The Buddha said as much in the Sutra of Unprecedented Causes and Conditions. A Buddha's age is hard to meet. The Dharma is hard to hear, meaning it is very hard to encounter a Buddha and harder still to have the chance to hear and receive the Dharma. It goes on. Human life is hard to keep, and the path is hard to attain. That is, our lifespan is fragile, hard to hold on to, and can be lost in no time. So what we have right now did not come easily, and we must be diligent. We should feel glad, and out of that gladness, put real effort in. Without that diligence, things become difficult. To be able to hear such profound and marvelous Dharma now is like sitting down to a meal after 100 hours without food, a chance that comes once in 1,000 years. What a joy it is. As I just said, when you meet Dharma this profound, it's like getting a single meal in 100 hours. You would eat it with the greatest eagerness and the greatest delight, treasuring every bite. You should receive the Dharma in that same spirit. So in this life, we must treasure the chance to receive the Dharma because everyone's circumstances are different. Some people may spend their whole lives immersed in the Dharma. His Holiness was like that, steeped in the Dharma from his earliest years, from the age of 5 or 6, according to his biography, right up to his passing at around 70, through all of it, including the 10 years of upheaval, he never once parted from the Dharma. This is truly remarkable. But for the rest of us, we should examine ourselves. How many years of your life have you actually spent listening to the Dharma? It's worth reviewing. I often examine my own case. I'm now in my 40s, and I've perhaps been fortunate enough to spend close to 20 years with my guru. What becomes of me from here? Who can say? But even this isn't most of my life. Since my childhood, went to schooling and herding yaks year after year. So the time I've spent listening to the Dharma isn't that long either. I've told you before that many of the teachings I received from my teacher were both the first time and the last time I ever heard it. Many of us today are in the same position. So from now on, whenever the chance to hear the Dharma comes by, I hope everyone will treasure it. And the teacher needn't be famous. These days, many people feel that as long as a teacher is well known, it's fine, even if he has no real qualities. This shouldn't be the way. Any teacher who has the genuine qualities will be acceptable. When you do find a qualified teacher, you have to have real faith in the Dharma. Don't size the person up and don't pick them apart with all kinds of afflicted thoughts. Take the Dharma itself as your measure and listen with a respectful heart. So, for the sake of such marvelous Dharma, it is only right to bear every hardship and difficulty, the bitter cold and the scorching heat, and to receive it gladly. Because while we're listening to the Dharma, on one hand we have to be patient, whether it be the heat, the hardships, or all the pressures and strains of worldly life one encounters. People nowadays may be under quite a lot of pressure as they try to listen to a teaching and have many things to face in their lives. So this kind of patience is something they need. And on the other hand, day to day, we should keep a sense of joy toward the Dharma. The Prajnaparamita Sutra already tells us how important the mind is. For example, if I'm in a happy state, I can travel hundreds of yojanas with ease and not feel the slightest weariness on the way. But if your heart isn't in it, even a short trip, a single earshot away, will feel like a drag. That's how it works. Whereas if there's joy in your heart, then even if you were asked to do the impossible, like to flatten Mount Meru to the ground, you'd think positively, Mount Meru is a compounded phenomenon after all. It's nothing so great. I'll go and do it. And in the end, you'd be able to reach your goal, even the goal of Buddhahood itself. That's why, when the Prajnaparamita Sutra teaches diligence, it puts such weight on the strength of the mind. And it's true. For example, if you are going to see someone in this world you're deeply fond of, you'd walk a great distance to get there without thinking twice. And as long as you had the time, you wouldn't feel a moment's discomfort on the road. But if you were going to meet an enemy or someone you can't stand, even half a step would feel like agony. So the power of the mind is tremendous. That's why, when we listen to the Dharma, whatever the teaching may be, given how vast its merit is and how rare the chance to meet it, we should think how rare it is to come across this opportunity in a whole lifetime. As long as I have the chance, I'll take it, with no haggling and no, is it all right if I skip today? I'm not feeling well. But each time, in the middle of a course of teachings, some people will call up the teacher, or if there's no ordained teacher. Since these days it's often lay practitioners who run the study groups in the cities, they'll phone the organizer all day long. Is it all right if I don't come today? My friend is sick. Is it all right if I don't come today? I'm not feeling well. Is it all right if I don't come today? I'm a little busy at work. Is it all right if I don't come today? I have a business trip. Is it all right if I don't come today? My mother isn't well, and she's in low spirits. I can't make it today. I'm going sightseeing with some people. All of these are nothing but excuses. If a person held listening to the Dharma to be the more important thing, he probably wouldn't miss even one session. The other day in Beijing, I met a civil servant. She said, A government job is rather complex. There are so very many rules, and our office is, frankly, extremely strict. But I found my own ways to manage and practice Buddhism. And the truth is, as long as you have the will, anyone can find a way. At home, you can find tactful things to say, and at work, you can find all sorts of skillful ways to make it work. She went on, from the day I started until now, I haven't missed a single class. So it really depends on the power of the mind, and I feel it in my own case too. Take my classes with you every day. If I didn't set this time firmly aside first, I'd surely be busy every single day, because the mind throws up all kinds of distractions. Today I'm thinking of this, tomorrow of that. Today I need to go somewhere. And then the class would never happen, but apart from a very few exceptions. If I put it first among all my affairs, I'll always find the time to teach. And it's the same for each of you with listening. As long as you make it the single most important part of your work and your life, you'll surely free up the time. Even if you fall ill and need an IV drip, you can bring the drip along to class and listen, which is an easy enough thing to do. So this is why everyone has to build up the strength of the mind. If you don't build it up, and you treat the classes as a pressure, as a burden, then they won't do you much good, and your conduct too will start going wrong in all sorts of ways. So it's my deep hope that when you receive the Dharma, you'll feel no weariness, but joy instead. The great masters of old did listen with such joy. I think I've mentioned before that in our monastery there was a tulku named Dicha, who was quite remarkable. His joy in the Dharma was beyond anyone's words. Just yesterday, some Dharma friends and I were exchanging stories about him. Locally, he was very well known, yet he cared nothing for fame or wealth or the like. Before I was ordained, while I was still a layman, I was once in Drango, where he was staying at a Gelug monastery. The policy at the time was still very tense, and no one dared admit they practiced Buddhism. Even so, I had the chance to be near him in those days, and I noticed he cared about nothing else, only listening to the Dharma. Back then, if one person was teaching and another listening, they could be arrested and thrown in prison. It was that dangerous. And yet there he was, studying the Vinaya Sutra with a geshe. When he came back, there were many visitors, but whatever they said, his mind didn't seem to be on them at all. He kept turning over and over the teachings he had heard. At the time, I didn't notice it, and I assumed every practitioner was probably like that. But the more I thought about it later, the more I realized that if we ourselves were dropped into that kind of environment and that culture at the time, would we have the courage to seek out study on our own and keep coming to class? Probably not. And even if you did come, you might feel no joy in it. Every one of us, when we listen, must cultivate that joy. So from tomorrow on, my hope is that the teachers at our academy, along with the people who sit and listen to them, will all have a joyful heart. I'm going to class today with a welling up of gladness inside. How grateful I am to our teachers. How grateful for the treasure of the Dharma. That is the attitude to have. Otherwise it becomes, ugh, the teacher is such a bother. And this Dharma is so hard. How much nicer it would be to just stay home and sleep in peace, all by myself. That would be the happiest thing in my whole life. But a wish is never realistic. And so it turns into, couldn't I just pay a little money to have the sutras chanted for me, so I'm spared from having to attend? As if to clear away an obstacle. That is a frightening way to think. I do hope all of us can find joy in listening to the Dharma. All right, we'll stop here for today.
Sonandai Tansa Sukaya Tanani Dhamma Pasi Jirgana Jirano Chupai Chupun Sonen Droa Dhamma
Padma-sadar-da Bandharangara Padma-sada Bandharangara Padma-sadar-da